problematic din talaga yung representation when it comes to consultation. On a macro level, ha? Kasi pag nag-uusap sa gobyerno and everything, sino ba umuupo? And who decides to appoint that person who sits and represents communities? Kasi iba din yung dynamic sa ground eh. So, nagiging problematic din siya. And maybe I would like to share an insight on yung kinakwento ay tanong ni Ms. Padma about yung how do you ensure that they also um, learn standards in marketing and things like that. Nagiging parang ano yun outright na challenge normally in a business kasi kung titingnan mo yung traditional business model, napaka-compartmentalized ng roles. Ibig sabihin, pag inventory officer ka, inventory officer ka. Pag nasa production ka, nasa production ka. So, ibig sabihin, nandun ka lang. So, ibig sabihin, may gap na talaga yung maker dun sa market mismo. What we are doing in Sisatonawa is that we invest really in engaging them whenever we have pop-ups or like say for example trade fair. Ginagastusan talaga namin to bring the makers there and sell their own products. Kasi malaking bagay yun eh. Yung parang naririnig nila na, uy, ang ganda tong design na to. Yung parang ganun. So they also get input about what's a marketable product. Or they would say, masyadong medyo madumi pa dito. They also get input from their customers, input about quality. So I think the entire principle of participation is something that has to be really institutionalized in social enterprise na hindi lang yung marketing ang pumupunta doon at nagma-market. Kasi the makers have to really ang hirap eh kasi parang we tried that. Like say for example, when we were starting, we were the ones selling it. Tapos, babalik kami kila Kuya Joel, sasabihin namin, Kuya, hindi siya nabenta kasi ganito, parang hindi daw bagay dun sa t-shirt niya na orange, ganyan. So, pag ikukwento mo ng ganyan, hindi nila nagigets yun. But if you give them practical experience and hear it themselves, directly from the front line, mas nakikita nila yon. Kaya nga, parang importante sa amin, parang ang laking bagay ang nawala sa amin at sa ginagawa namin nung pumasok yung COVID kasi nawalan kami ng ganong opportunities for mentoring eh. Kasi ang ginagawa namin, pupunta sila doon sa Manila, sa National Arts and Crafts Fair. I'm there and then we will bring two weavers at two artisans or artists. Sila yung pagbibentahin namin. Siyempre, before that, we will orient them how to do the sales recording and things like that. At the end of the day, they would have to balance the sales, and then we'll do some processing discussion, ano natutunan, ano yung narinig, ano yung nag-stand out, things like that. How can they bring this learning in their production practice, yung mga ganyan, or in their design thinking process. I think for us, that kind of thing, that kind of mentoring works. And that gives them more feel and understanding of how it is to market in the mainstream economy. Hindi doon sa yung alam nila na nandiyan lang sa local ano. Yung I really like the question about indigenous critique being part of the indigenous knowledge. Importante talaga 'yon. And I think ang problema talaga if we're talking about sustainability, ito dapat yung inire-recognize eh. Kasi it's the critique that gives them voice. It's the critique that gives them clear political, economic, and cultural participation in the entire process.
So, gusto ko lang marinig siguro yung mga nakulubog sa local government, kagaya ni Mr. Ferdy Balanag. Paano ba yung actions ng local government to ensure yung ganitong healthy discourse siguro or healthy na conversation among makers and the government and the market, at saka paano nila ini-ensure yung dynamics ay mas maging fair dun sa makers. Gusto ko lang din marinig. Kasi matagal na din akong wala sa Baguio.
Sa Council for Baguio Creative City at sa Baguio Tourism Council, nakalimutan kong banggitin kanina yung composition ng mga ng board ng both organizations. mas private. Bale, it's composed of 60% from the private sector, 40% from the government, no? And kasama dun sa mga miyembro ng board na galing sa gobyerno ay ang DTI, ang DOT, ang mayor sits as co-chairman for both organizations. And before we even started with any program, inuna na namin yung mapping at paggawa ng directory ng mga artists at craftspeople. Yan, para ma-identify natin sila lahat. At nung nagsimula yung pandemya, nag-field ulit kami ng survey forms para ma-identify kung sino yung mga talagang nangangailangan ng tulong.
Meron lang akong gustong balikan dun sa, we talked about fair compensation, fair trade, ganyan. But this is addressed to several, no? Like, unahin natin si Lori. How do you know na, paano kayo nag-come up ng fair compensation nyo, Lor? Ano man kayo ito na lang ang per square meter, per square foot, ganito na lang ang gawin natin. Paano?
Yan?
Usapan nyo yan with the weavers o ano?
May consultation kami within the group. Siyempre, pinag-uusapan namin yung paano ginawa, ilang oras, ilang araw matatapos ang isang banig. Doon kami nagbabase. Lahat ng kasama na rin 'yon kung pagdating sa magkano yung mga administrative costs, mga ganyan. So, yun ang pinagbabasahan namin. So, lahat yun, isa-isa sa kanila, may ginawa kaming questionnaire at saka parang gumawa kami ng formula kung paano siya computing. Kasama na yon yung per day talaga nila, ilang araw yun isang banig. Isang banig matatapos sa 7 araw o mahigit. So, yung average doon, ng lahat, 80 weavers sila. So, tiningnan namin yung magkapapareho-parehong araw. Kasi may iba, mabagal, lalo na pagbaguhan, yung may expert din na mabilis. So, doon sa, para mag-meet doon. At saka pero madalas talaga natatapos kung ilang araw.
Lord, curious lang ako, no? Malapit na tayong matapos, no? I know some of you have to go also. Pero, Lord, isang last question ko lang siguro sa'yo. Paano, kunwari expert, no? Kunwari master mat weaver na yan. Mas mataas ba ang rate niya o hindi naman? Pareho lang. Doon sa baguhan.
Kasi makikita yan sa gawa din nila. Pag expert ka, talagang, tsaka consideration na rin yung alam niya na mga
mas mataas.
designs.
So, mas mataas ang bayad niya.
May mataas.
Okay.
Tsaka qualify namin ito yung gawa mo. Sa result na, kahit naman din, halimbawa, may baguhan pero magaling na rin talaga siya. So, naka-qualify siya doon sa sa output ng kanyang gawa doon.
Okay.
May standard na ginagawa.
Ay, may question si Anya.
Miss Laya, I just wanted to answer Miss Kat's question about pricing. I'll siguro briefly lang share about our business model. So when we do our business skills transfer and we teach our community partners on how to properly cost their weaves or their products, we co-create a template. So pareho kala Miss Lori, bini-breakdown yung materials cost at nag-conduct din po ng time and motion kung gaano katagal ginagawa yung produkto. Pero yung benchmark po or yung basihan would be the minimum wage in that municipality or town. So we say it's fair wage when an artisan is able to earn minimum wage. At least a decent income would be a minimum wage. So karaniwan, yun yung kumbaga as a social enterprise or as an enabler, Yun po yung nagiging standard namin na it can't go below minimum wage. And the aim is for it to be way above minimum wage. Kung ano yung parang decent living wage wherein the artisan can actually provide for their family, attend to their well-being, but also be able to save. So yun din yung isang factor na pinapahalagahan namin, yung capacity of the artisan to save and be able to invest in their future. Also to that point, when it comes to the master and apprentice, our business model incentivizes the master weavers and we augment their income by 20% with the agreement that they actually pass on their skills to the younger generations. And ito po yung solution namin to address the gaps in cultural continuity or transmission, to really kind of encourage and entice younger artisans to learn the craft. So yun. So this is when we do the costing, minsan kasi the artisans are only stuck in materials and labor, and they're not able to consider overhead costs like electricity, transportation, fuel, gas, ganyan. So, Kuya Joel, may motor yan. So, hindi po na-incorporate yung mga costs na yan. So, nagugulat sila, bakit lugi pa rin ako? Or bakit wala na rin akong profit? Kasi yun lang yung nako-consider material and labor. Also, we encourage as much as possible and we educate them, what does a healthy profit margin mean? Kasi yung may guilt factor na ay baka ang taas naman ng ng profit margin, feeling nila shrewd sila ng mga negosyante pag tinataasan yung profit margins. And we've had these conversations with Susutunawa. But I always explain na when we talk about, sustainability, we have it's incorporate, it's within the anchor of responsible profit. And the reason why we have or we put in place margins like that is for us to be able to sustain the business. So with all our community enterprise partners and even with Anthill, 80% of our profits are reinvested back in these programs and back in the business. Because primarily to sustain what we have created. So yun lang po.
Yeah, just to add with what Anya has said, our commitment naman din for fair compensation is basically almost the same with Anya's model. Only that when we factor in pricing, aside from the overhead and everything, we also give profit, which we consider as like anong tawag doon? Royalty for the maker who designed that specific item.
Yeah.
Kasi importante yun that they get to value the creative input that they put aside from just the labor and the indigenous knowledge that they also use. So yan, yon, kasama yon. And then before we also partner with Anthill, we also have our own savings program. Kasi bago kami naging partner ng Anthill, parang mas sila yung pinipeg namin with what they're doing in the community. So we have an independent savings program aside from the savings program that they have with Anthill.
Magaganda yung best practices din na sinishare. And the idea na hindi lang economic yung considerations also. It's also telling the stories, ensuring that these stories are passed on, and the idea of who has control over these stories. So I think these are very good learning points for an organization like Nayong Pilipino. At tama yung nabanggit na point kanina na hindi lang parating ang tinitingnan ng institusyon ng Estado o anumang institusyon is ano yung makukuha from the groups or anong meron kayo, yung hindi ganun ka-transactional. But we relate with indigenous communities or any community at all as our teachers, as our resource persons na nagtuturo. Hindi sila parang yung dating treatment na informant. No? So, sila, resource people, they are teachers. Ganon yung ganong klaseng perspective yung nakukuha natin. Just like yung dynamics ni na Kuya Joel at Carl, no? Kuya Joel is sa community nila sa Lake Cebu, recognize ang kanilang contributions, no, and laging merong dialogue, between the community and the volunteers at kina Marlon na gusto ko yung exercise, yung community exercise, no, and in fact nagkaka-ideya tuloy kami sa Nayong Pilipino kung paano ipe-present yung marami kami kasi sa permanent collection na objects na hindi na matrace kung saan nanggaling. Ito yung nanggaling pa na, for example, dala ng Panamin, no? So for example, we have funerary markers, we have plenty of textiles, we have accessories.
Wow!
Kailangan i-trace kung saan nanggaling at kung paano napunta sa Nayong Pilipino. So maganda yung nabanggit na kwento kanina ni Marlon sa naging community exercise nila na pinakita nila yung creation and then let the community critique and gather the community's reactions. So maraming salamat sa mga insights na napulot namin.